We are all collectively responsible for what may be the greatest preventable Holocaust in the history of planet Earth. I have 30 years of experience as an investigative journalist. I've broken major scandals, going out to try and map how the world really worked as opposed to the way we were told it worked. Our map has proven deadly accurate. My economic predictions saw we had it so right. In 2006, we said, get out of debt right now. Check your mortgage carefully. We issued a whole series of warnings. It will be nothing like we've ever seen before. Everything that we said was going to happen is taking place right now. Gold prices, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the stock market. It's not that Bernie Madoff was a pyramid scheme. The whole economy is a pyramid scheme. Of course I've been called a conspiracy theorist, but I don't deal in conspiracy theory. I deal in conspiracy fact. The mortal blow to human industrialized civilization will happen when oil prices spike and nobody can afford to buy that oil, and everything will just shut down. Unlike the Great Depression, we do not have infinite resources. Nothing grows forever. There is a cycle: birth, growth, maturation, decline, and death. Cars don't run. The mail stops getting delivered. Planes don't fly. Law enforcement stops working. This is all part of the collapse. If you're in a camp and a bear attacks, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You only have to be faster than the slowest camper. The challenge being faced by the human race now is either evolve or perish, grow up or die. You have to believe, not hope, not pray that there's a way out of it, and you're going to find it.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Peter, and welcome to the Wednesday, December 9th, 2009 weekly radio address. What you just heard was the preview for a film that's in theaters now, select theaters, called Collapse, which features the work of a man named Michael Rupert. And I just recently saw this film, and it's truly an amazing work in regards to what is in store for humanity. And I think while there's certain things I can argue with Mr. Rupert about, specifically annotations regarding technological ingenuity and progress when it comes to science and the applications of science, his angles on the economic problems and the environmental problems are truly, truly accurate as far as I can tell. The same things that I talked about in Zeitgeist Addendum, the same things Jacques has talked about for years. So I would encourage everyone to go out and see this film. It's very much worth seeing. And I'm going to leave it at that. But obviously you can tell by the fact that I started the show with that I find it very important. If you really want to understand where things are probabilistically heading as far as the world society, in regard to the multi-angled collapse, regarding the pyramid scheme of the fractional reserve, which requires infinite growth to be sustainable, coupled with the quadrillion dollars of outstanding derivatives that the government has attempted to buffer with a few trillion thrown at it, which does absolutely nothing because it's essentially a black hole, coupled in with peak oil, coupled in with all the environmental issues, water, food, and the general domino effect that occurs, that can occur, is occurring, and will likely speed up. This is a great film to get that information to people, especially those out there that are very cynical of this reality. This film was very, very informative in that regard. Nothing I hadn't heard before, but I thought it was a very well-made film, and I want everyone to go out and check it out. And that's that. I apologize if my voice is a little low today. I'm been having a cold, so I'm probably about a third lower than usual, but I'm hanging in there. What we have in store for the show is the first half. I'm going to deal with your questions and a few basic announcements. And in the second half, I'm going to have Gilbert and Jen Wilding on. You guys have heard from Gilbert before. He heads our international chapters, and Jen heads our state chapters now. She's been organizing state meetings for the United States domestically. Very productive, and I think I think the first time she's been on, so I think it'd be great to have her introduce herself so everyone can get an understanding of what she does, because it's very critical on multiple levels what the states do here in the U.S. Obviously, this would apply to every country. The United States, of course, where I live, it's easier for me to organize certain things. So in time, we'll hopefully begin a trickle-down effect to all states and regions and territories in every country. That, of course, is the goal if you follow the work that we do. So anyway, what do I have to announce here? Basically, the media project, I got in touch with Scott recently. He's the one that's doing zeitgeistmediaproject.com, and that's progressing very well. I've been able to review some things, and I'm very excited about what this project will entail. So that should be up. I'm not going to give you an exact date, but it's moving much more quickly now. As many of you know, we all work on a volunteer basis, so sometimes it's just difficult because we all have jobs. Time is, of course, money in this system, which invariably makes things a little bit slow sometimes, but we're getting there. People keep asking about DVDs of the lectures, both my lectures and Jock's lectures. Yes, I'm working on this right now. I'm outputting a DVD of the Iowa lecture and the London lecture, and I'm trying to get resources for any other media that might be out there. Off the cuff, if anybody out there has high-res versions of certain lectures that they could put into a torrent, DVD torrent, let me know. I think I'm in touch with most people that are doing this, but nevertheless, I'm trying to get all of these things on the toolkit page so they can be distributed outside of the internet. Z-Day, Venus Project Symposium. I got approval from the Williamsburg Art and Historical Society to basically organize this. It took a chair of approval to get this underway. So it is underway, and I think there's a question in my list of questions that denotes this. But I'll go ahead and say that the weekend of March 13th and 14th is this symposium in Brooklyn, New York, and it's 95% clear. Contracts haven't been signed, and I just want to throw it out there. I'm going to try and settle this as quickly as possible. I'm going to meet with the Venus Project soon to discuss of course, the specifics of this. It's going to be quite an affair. So when I do know definitively, so everyone out there that's excited about it, don't make any plans yet. At least don't make reservations or anything yet. Don't want to lead anybody the wrong way. But it is coming very quickly, and I hope to have within 2 weeks definitive information about this and have it set in stone so people can plan as need be. And let's see. I think that's just about it. I think there's some other issues that are going to come from the questions. And so I'm going to jump right into your questions right now. Yeah. Okay. Number 1. Hello, Peter. You often talk about social therapy. You told that even if we create a Venus Project city today and we drop humans there as they exist today, these people will still be killing each other, and I completely agree with this. My question is, how can the social therapy occur, and how can we participate in the social therapy that subsequently results to the revolution of each other's consciousness? I hope my question will be answered. Well, the social therapy we talk about is, of course, very important for what we do. The Zeitgeist Media Project, for example, is a big issue with this. Hold on one moment, I'm having a technical problem. Okay, there we go. The Zeitgeist Media Project, the general work that I do with the lectures, the work that Jacques does with the lectures, you'll notice Jacques and I don't sit back and talk about extreme technical things. Jacques, of course, could easily do that. But it's about communicating the values and larger order reasoning behind everything that we talk about, everything that's important to this holistic concept. So when I talk about social therapy, we have to get the value system and the understandings out there before anything else. That's basically what the educational aspect of social therapy means. I call it therapy because many people have some grave distortions, unfortunately, about the world they live in. They really can't see beyond the restrictions of certain social systems that have existed in the past. They have no idea of anything that could possibly not be free market capitalist or, say, could not be communist and not be socialist. They could transcend all of those ideas. That's what I mean by therapy. As far as what you can do, you really just have to join your community and help spread the information. Again, back to the Zeitgeist Media Project, I might be making this larger than it might end up being, but it's about using creativity to influence each other. As we know, we can reason things with each other all day long, and very often it does not have a good effect. We have to get under people's skin. We have to make them feel things, and that's where art and communication comes in. That's why I have the nature of the films that I do. Obviously, if you look at what I speak of in these lectures, and then you look at what I talk about and the way I approach my films, they're very, very different, because I'm going for two different angles. One is an emotional effect, and one is a purely intellectual effect. So you have to kind of go both directions. The chapters, of course, are spreading awareness. In the end, back to therapy, one thing I'll say just as a tangent, people have racist inclinations still. They have nationalist inclinations still. They have narrow identifications with religious organizations. Even the free market capitalist structure itself is a promotion of separation. So this therapy aspect comes into play very much. I mean, I consider racism, nationalism, extreme religious identification and isolation, and free market capitalism to be all forms of discrimination, either in effect or as a consequence. So these are the types of things that really need to get out there, and that's why I talk about them so much. Number 2, I understand that over time machines will be programmed to fix themselves, or other machines will fix other machines, and over time the machines will basically make everything. My question is, who will make and build the programs that operate with these machines in the very beginning? Okay, I'll stop you there. There's 2 questions. Well, this is where values come in. If you were in an environment where you could help yourself and help society, why not do so? It's not that there's a chicken and egg type thing where people have erroneously assumed that somehow we magically stumble into a world where everything's automated, no one has to do anything they don't want to do. That's not the case. It's that the motivations will be changed. It's that the reward system of monetary incentive will become obsolete, and we'll realize the detriment that it actually poses. And people will do things just as they do now. Millions of people volunteer on a daily basis for many causes. They will want to help. Scientists, when they go into the lab, are not thinking, I got to get out of here at 5 o'clock so I can watch a movie, or I want to go visit this and that, or I want to get my paycheck. You'll find that in the world of science specifically, and again, this is a bit of a leap. I'm not just saying all scientists are like this, but out of all the disciplines out there, out of all the pursuits, you tend to find those that work in the ether of reality, hence scientific investigation, tend to do so because they have a genuine interest in doing it. I am inundated all day long by wonderful people who have genuine creative interests and technical interests to want to help. So people will help because they want to help. And it's not going to take every single person to do so either. Anyway, I'm not going to belabor that. I think who will build and make machines? We will. We will know what we're doing. We will have an intent and an interest to want to help each other and ourselves, because, as I pointed out, there really is no other form of help. You can't really help yourself without helping society, and vice versa. That is the state of mind that needs to be fallen into. I think I made that pretty clear in my Iowa lecture. And the second part of your question is, how are we going to get the materials and resources to make these machines if the only way to obtain them is by money? How are we going to get the funds to do this in the beginning? Well, there's 2 angles to that. There's the experimental circular research city that Jacques talked about for years. I believe this could happen financially. It would have limitations inherently. However, the real goal would be to find a country that's willing to allocate simply resources. To find to find a country that could. Actually, hold on 1 second here. I have a technical issue. To find an organization, a country that is able to allocate resources without the need for monetary circulation. To find, say, Latin America, which is abundant with resources, and finally you get a government that says, we've had enough, the system has failed, we can't do this anymore. We are going to, whatever terminology they would use, they would nationalize or any nonsense like this, whatever terminology they would use in the current system would eventually be applicable to allocate resources for the common good. So that's the way it would probably work out. So, but again, it's two levels, and I wish I could tell you more specifically. Number 3, Peter, compared to the original Zeitgeist movie, Zeitgeist Addendum brought forth a whole new idea that probably most original fans weren't expecting or aware of. The new idea was the resource-based economy of the Venus Project. Will your next film have any major revelations, or will it be about what we already know within the movement? Another question, is the new film already complete on paper, or are you still looking for additional material? How can you help with the new material ideas, or in any other way if you are interested? How can we help with new material ideas? Well, honestly, anybody that wants to give me tips, I'm absolutely open to that. In fact, I've been very, very helpful. Very, very helpful to. It's been very, very helpful for people to email their questions, to email their tips to me. I've been very happy. It's been wonderful, and I really encourage everyone else to do that as well. So basically, the film is going to deal with the expansion of the Venus Project, expansion of the ideas that compile all of the attributes, expansion of the attributes that are relevant to the Venus Project. It's not going to be, quote, just the Venus Project. It's going to deal with a lot of academics. It's going to deal with basically all the attributes that we continually talk about, but shown that it is possible, shown that it is a reality, that it isn't a pie in the sky, that these things can be done. So that's pretty much the nature of the new film. And again, it's still in development, and it's going to be quite a long haul for me to get these things going. Please explain the difference. Let's see, this is number 4. Please explain the difference between central planning in our system as opposed to a communist system. My answer would be that the difference is the use of human labor, if you can call it decision-making labor. Human thinking is not required. Decision-making would actually be calculated based on the comprehensive database information about where resources would best be allocated. Yes, that's correct. People should also know that there would be no calculations concerning human behavior. There would be no controls over how people might behave. Violent or aberrant behavior, as would be minimal, could be addressed by people, either by who is, okay, I'm going to jump to the end of this. Basically, the question in regards to central planning our system versus the communist system, the points you make are actually quite accurate. I would say you can call it a planned economy. This has a bad ring to it due to what has happened historically, due to the rise of people that become dictators, and it's not based on really the welfare of society whatsoever. It's based on a larger order stratification. Abstractly speaking, a planned economy versus a market economy there's really no comparison as far as what would be more efficient in abstraction. It's simply getting the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure together to do it. It's the only logical way as far as I can tell. There really is no other way to account for the resources of the planet and use it in the most efficient way than to have a planned economy. And I know that's a controversial thing, but there's really, if you, for example, had a factory and you had a bunch of machines that did certain jobs and you had a bunch of people and you had a bunch of other tools and you just tossed everything randomly to everybody else and gave them no instructions about how to work together as a holistic system, obviously you'd have chaos and that factory wouldn't work very well. Well, the planet is nothing more than a factory, and it's time we treat it holistically as such. There is really no other way to do it. So I think disregarding all of the continual conflicts that arise, I believe you really have to just look at the train of thought. That is really what it comes down to. And when it comes to all of the things that get thrown out there regarding arguments against the system, the train of thought is immutable. So that's really what it comes down to. Those words don't mean anything. Number 5, you keep saying if the Obama administration really cared, quote, they would, unquote. Do you think you are being harsh on Obama? He's only the president and has to push all of his ideas through Congress. Well, I'll stop you there. Obama's trapped just like everybody else. Even if his intents are entirely good, he doesn't have a means to express them because of the way the financial orders actually operate. So that it's just kind of sad. He's obviously a figurehead. He's obviously there to represent something that the establishment wants to be reflected in society to the effect that people can have some form of hope. But as you've seen with the expansion of the Afghanistan war, with the pretty much colossal failure of the bailouts and the economy, that there's something else going on underneath the surface that is far beyond his control. And it's really the system itself. So when I say the Obama administration, I'm referring holistically to the system. And I speak in gesture, too, to the effect that, basically people need to understand that the system is the problem. It isn't any administration. I think if there was really power in the Obama administration, if there was really power, then they would, if there was really an intent to change, of course, too, then there would be a massive force coming out of the administration to do some of the things that we talk about. But that's obviously not going to happen. There's too much corporate power, essentially, that's in operation. And it's never going to work that way until the system is addressed as a whole. Number 6. Where is it? Hi, Peter. I'm a United States Marine Corps recruiter, and I'm totally against this recruiting position, especially after being enlightened by your movies, which make complete sense to anyone who has common sense. But the thing is, I don't know what to do because I have already threatened to quit once and risked losing everything and all benefits. I need help. I can't recruit for an organization that represents the corrupt agenda of this country and have to work from 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. for their cause. I'm completely behind this movement, and I will do anything to start spreading the word. Well, I wish I could make decisions for you, I suppose. Well, actually, no, I take that back. It really comes down to what you tend to lose. I mean, obviously, recruiting people for the military is I would say just get out of it, frankly, unless you've reached the point, you've done it for so many years, that the benefits that you would lose would outweigh, say, benefits for your family. That's a very complex question. I think you know my position very clearly on that issue, and I'm really just going to leave it at that. You have to make a decision of what you really value and weigh the attributes of your economic and, quote, benefits, as you denote, as opposed to the rather despotic industry that you're representing. So that's all I could really say about that. Number 7. Peter, I've been dwelling on a particular question that was posed to me several days ago while I was lecturing to a group. Very simply, how can we design things to last? No doubt we have a massive amount of materials at our disposal if the world collaborates. The ultimate question, I guess, comes down to what materials would we use to replace what we are already using. We can get rid of planned obsolescence, but it doesn't have to be planned to accrue. That's true. We can build electric cars. We can build houses such as are described, as well as many other things. With what materials would the many items in our world be created from with these better designs? And what materials would many items in our world be created from these better designs? Also, what kind of abundance do you have of these materials? Well, I'm just going to give you a general example of the use of an advanced form of concrete that Jacques Fresco has worked with, which all houses would be made out of. If you watch if you research the Venus Project, they believe in no use of wood and materials that do not burn specifically, so the towns don't require a fire department. It's impermeable materials that really can be holistically created through extrusion technologies. I'm not going to go into all of that. As far as the issue of how do we design things to last, well, we have to get rid of the monetary system. That's really it. There's really no other choice than to realize there's really no other angle if we attempt to have any form of sustainability than to remove the mechanisms of competition and this interest to perpetually duplicate products over and over and over again, to have industries produce products that have to be affordable, therefore they have to limit quality and efficiency. I hope everyone's clear on that. I made that point very clear in both lectures. So once those attributes are removed, then it's like a veil is lifted as far as what's actually possible. So regarding the specifics of materials, that's something that's well documented. I think if you go to thevenusproject.com, you will find a tremendous amount of wonderful material on those issues. So, and again, it comes back to the survey management system, and then, of course, information processes through artificial intelligence that we talk about in the lectures as well. Rather than one person having to consider materials independently with one mind, or even just a group, we put the properties of materials into a database, and then we can feed back off of the information compiled and assessed logically by this database. It can be done. It's been done. It's done in remote sectors, remote areas, and it's a tremendous. It will be a tremendous advantage once we have a tool like this and move forward in that way. Excuse me today, I'm still struggling with this cold. Number 8. It occurs to me that the first research city could be constructed as a research university. I know that this movement is a long-term one and that focusing on building awareness is critical. However, I feel that the untapped capacity of the people that are already on board is awesome. Putting us to productive use would build awareness like nothing else. This is just a shred of an idea towards the end. How can the Zeitgeist Movement, the Venus Project, facilitate such an effort beyond discussion groups? Yes, that's, of course, a continual question that I get, and ultimately building awareness is still the first step. You know, you have to, if you live in an area that, if you're part of the movement and you're not in a chapter yet, I think it's very important that that you get involved in a chapter. It's really going to take a community level. It's going to take sort of a tribal notion to get these things to move forward. And from there, projects will arise regionally. People will have events across the world. I'm doing the best I can to influence people into a kind of a positive unfolding as far as this regard. It's also important to understand that we are faced with a tremendous collapse. So those of you that come into contact with those that are suffering because of what's happening, I think it's very important that you communicate our ideals and what we're trying to do. Again, as far as I'm concerned, there's really no other way that things are going to be pulled out. We're going to pull out of this situation with the resource depletion and the continual fiscal collapse. These are important things, and again, those are issues of awareness. We really can't do anything unless people are very much aware of it. And awareness tends to be exponential if it has a basis that's actually tangible. And I've noticed this pattern already. There's been, I'd say, a near exponential growth in the movement so far, and I've had to find a lot more people to help out. So it's helping. Again, goes back to the cities. We talked about the city systems. Getting involved in elements of education in skill sets, that are relevant to what we talk about. For example, systems engineers, those that work in advanced forms of agriculture, those that work in robotics or nanotechnology or molecular engineering. These are all very tangible, relevant educational aspects that will come into play in the future by all means. Number 9. Would you consider the possibility to dedicate more time to debunk the people that debunk you? And number 2, if someone kills someone, actually I'll just start with that one. As far as the debunking aspect, the first film is very controversial, and while the films have a relationship to the movement, they are not the movement. I've made this very clear. The debunking issue tends to come from the debunking issue of the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist Movement is almost unheard of. I've never seen someone that claims to debunk the ideas that support our cause outside of just meaningless name calling and immature behavior of such. So other than that, my films are not the movement, my ideas are not the movement. Second part of this question, if someone kills someone else, who will look at the evidence to find the murderer? Who will investigate a murderer who probably have fled to another place? Well, obviously in transition, we'll have to have the need for security just as we do today, except the goal is different. Security exists in the transition, but the goal is of constantly reducing the number of people needed to maintain this problem. And if you have a system that's designed to work, to give people what they need, the necessities of life, to restrict them, to remove all the stress, to relieve stress is the biggest issue, as psychosocial stress is tremendous in the world today. And we have to relieve this pressure, or distortion is just going to keep growing. It's terrifying to see what could be in store for the future as, again, the collapse occurs and the oil continues to run out and everything else that's going on if changes aren't made. So, there's going to be an even more dire need for security in the future, sadly, as this transition occurs. But I want to make it very clear that the point is to remove laws, to remove police, to remove prisons. And how do you do that? You go after root causes of social problems. And again, this was made very clear in the Iowa lecture. Number 10. Hi, Peter. While I understand that many decisions will be arrived at automatically, it seems obvious that some will have to be agreed upon. And nobody mentioned exactly how they are going to do it. For example, we need to extract X energy from region A, and we have Y resources available. Suppose the central computer says we need to put 70% of resources in building a geothermal power plant and 30% resources in building wind turbines. However, the predictions say that wind is likely to increase in next years, so it could be better to use 45% of resources for that one and build one more wind turbine. That's a decision to make. Who's going to make it? Well, first of all, everything you just pointed out was absolutely technical, and it can be weighed mathematically. So if an analysis presents a probability in this direction coupled with another analysis of another probability, the probabilities are over 50%, then there's no other choice but to move forward with that technical decision, that arrival at decisions, with, of course, the goal of eliminating negative retroactions and sustainability. If the goal is that, which it isn't today, then the decisions become self-evident. Now, whether a computer system deals with this type of decision-making is an interesting question to ask, and there's a huge complex amount of information that would have to be addressed in order to figure out what goes to what. Obviously, a team of scientists dedicated to specific areas is extremely relevant, and that's sort of the nature of the maintenance of the system. So, is it democratic? Well, democracy, in my mind, comes from the election of ideas, not people. In this system, we bring in people, and it doesn't work, obviously. We bring in people that are typically from the background of law and politics, which, of course, there's very little problem solving on a technical level in those regards. So the team joining that you denote, people would submit their ideas. The ideas are evaluated by the informational database. This is an advanced form. Even if they weren't evaluated by the informational database, they'd be evaluated by peers of technicians. Could there be a voting survey aspect? There certainly could be. But with the intent of this system, the requirements of that are very minimal, as long as the intent is the goal of maximum sustainability and efficiency. I know that sounds very general, but that is the nature of the reward mechanism of the environment. Therefore, corruption would become a thing of the past. And any corruption that did occur would easily be dealt with very quickly, because everyone sees everything. There's no secrecy. So there's many things I could say upon that. But these are all. I'm trying to give you different angles as opposed to the things I've stated in the lectures. I think the Iowa lecture did very well to describe once again how this system of participation emerges. Let's see, where am I? Number 11. Will the third movie, aside from presenting the Venus Project more thoroughly, also be an appealing introduction for new people to view, or will it be just a sequel to the previous two? Again, it's going to be, I think I already answered that question, actually. It's going to deal with the specifics of everything that was talked about at the end of Addendum, expanded in an academic sense, with professionals that deal with the mediums that we talk about that are so important: systems operations, nanotechnology, of course, human behavior, anthropologists, psychologists. It's going to be a very different work by all means. Number 12. Hi, Peter. I believe education is extremely important in shaping minds of a new generation. I am sure that if our movement could influence education, we would have a change that we desire when those children grow up. We would have a change that we desire when those children grow up. Yes, we would have the change, is what they meant, as we could influence their adaptation to our sick society. What is your opinion on the subject? I personally cannot name directly the roots of the problems of our current educational system. Do you have any idea what the root problem of the educational system is? That should be addressed first. Well, Jacques has talked about this again numerous times on prior radio addresses, so I don't want to belabor it. If you just go back, people should really go back and start listening to the prior addresses. There's also a transcription that's probably searchable at this point. That's online at the zeitgeistmovement.com. I'm also working on an informational database to try to avoid this repeating questions. I just have so much going on. It's very difficult for me to continue to do things. And there's so many people. There's only so much access I can give to various parties the way the admin structure is set up. But basically, education comes down to values, first and foremost. What is the point of education? It really has to do with the way people behave. It has to do with the way they approach society, the way they think about the world around them. When you have kids that are given an A, one kid's given an F, it's immediately going to create animosity. I think Jacques made a great example in a prior point, and I'll go ahead and restate it. If a kid has glasses, we say, well, if a kid is vision impaired, he can't see the blackboard, he can't take in information, we give him glasses. If a kid has a problem hearing, you give him a hearing aid so he can comprehend. If a kid has less number of neurons in a specific area for cognitive function, then the kid is simply deemed stupid because we haven't figured out how to resolve that problem. We haven't figured out the technical resolution. So there's no such thing as a, quote, stupid person. There could be levels of, quote, mental retardation that do occur. And those are, of course, the exception. Most people have an average sensibility, and really their problems arise from the fact that they've been conditioned and in certain frameworks and certain emotional responses that they reject new information, or they're locked into a specific ideological dogma that also rejects new information. So I would say that the biggest challenge for education is to really understand what the problems are that people have, and to create a social attribute which allows people to avoid things like jealousy, to promote working together and cooperation, not competition. Things have been very backwards for a long, long time in regards to people thinking that competition is a positive attribute, where you have one son who's doing really well, and you as a parent throw it in the face of your other son to try to get them motivated to do well also. Now, while there might be a temporal aspect to that, to increase someone's initiative, it still has a detrimental emotional attribute. And I think that's one of the biggest problems of the educational system, is your values come into play. People feel value. When they get F's and F's and F's, they don't know why, and they really are trying. That means that there's something, that means the environment's wrong. The child should be treated very differently. Again, Jacques is much better at describing that scenario than I am because of his experience, and he's had children. He has great stories about teaching his kids certain things, how to be autonomous, how to think for themselves. So that's, next time I have Jacques on, we can continue to bring that point up. Number 13. Hello, Peter. I have talked with Roxanne about this, but there is nothing set in place yet. I thought you might be able to figure this out or delegate it to somebody credible. Many of us would like to bequeath our assets, property, money, intellectual copyrights, etc., to the Venus Project or the Zeitgeist Movement when we die, but so far there is nothing set up. This is needed in the near future as some members are getting up there and want to be responsible and would like to make the necessary arrangements to facilitate this. Wow, well, that's a very intense interest, which I can see would have a large amount of possible negative issues. Frankly, I would be hesitant to do anything like that right now because of the backlash that might occur from parties that choose to be very skeptical of what we're doing. But I think that's a wonderful idea. I wouldn't know where to begin right now. It's beyond my scope of things. The Venus Project has a 501c for donations, so I think that there's an outlet for you right there. I mean, you can bequeath things to a 501c if I understand correctly. I think you can bequeath things to just about any organization simply by putting it into whatever your document is, your will or what have you. But again, that's way beyond my thought process at this stage. I will give more thought to that, but I really want people to be active. It's not a matter of property and assets. It's being active and spreading this information. But very interesting point. Very interesting point. Let's see. Number 14. Hey, PJ, 2 questions. I have to put, 2 questions. Have you put any more thought into the actual date of Z-Day 2010 moving to the weekend? I already stated this, so I'm going to skip that. Also, I remember you mentioning getting Jacques, or a few for that matter, onto TED. I see no threads for him mentioning this. TED rejected my application, which I completely expected, and Jacques didn't apply because they charged quite a bit of money for the seniors fellowship. So while I really enjoyed TED, TED is much more isolated, I think, in this regard. Granted, I'll keep trying in the future. I think there's a lot of good minds that go on there, but as of now, not a big deal. Number 15. Hi, Peter. Would you share with us what you've learned from your visit to the Maharishi University of Management? For instance, what do you think about consciousness-based education? Interesting. Well, the consciousness-based education concept that I had read when I was there, I really couldn't find a tangible definition of that. It's not the kind of thing that it's more of a gestural distinction coupled in with some of the methodologies that they use. I think the educational system basically works the same. The only difference in that school is they have this thing they call transcendental meditation, which they practice fairly frequently, I believe 2 times a day. I thought was fascinating. It's interesting contrast. It's better to talk to a bunch of rigid academics that tend to have a propensity, perhaps, to be relatively closed in their worldviews, or is it better to talk to people that have an open mind, that are doing things that are very contrary to the norm? And I'm not quite sure the answer, frankly. It's obviously somewhere in between. I was very impressed with the Maharishi University of Management. I met the vice president, gave me one of their books in regards to some of the work and research they've done with their transcendental meditation techniques. Some of it I think is supported, and some of it I think isn't supported. I hold some of it as a great staple of relaxation of the mind and what it can mean to be relaxed and reduce stress. As we all should know, we have to reduce stress in our society. Stress is what causes so much conflict, financial stress, psychosocial stress. On the other side, there was a very improbable issue that I'm kind of looking into in my free time. They call the Invincibility Society. Essentially, they feel that they can change the world by meditating, to put it very simply. And that's something I'm not willing to really comment on because it's, again, I see as highly improbable. I'll say that. Other than that, I'm trying to be very open-minded to what anybody says, and I was given all this documentation, and I'm going to try and look through it, and do my due diligence out of respect for those that gave it to me. But punch it up. You'll see if you want to research this information for yourself. You can find it through the Maharishi University of Management website. But overall, I met some really nice people and very progressive people that were doing some very thought-provoking things. That's for sure. Number 16. Excuse me. Peter, Jacques has stated on numerous occasions that he won't release some of his work or information as it could be used negatively. My question is, will these resources become available, or are they only necessary when we have completed the transition into a resource-based economy? That is a very interesting. That's a very interesting point. Excuse me. I would say that the information that Jacques told me about his inventions that he doesn't want to release, there's very good reasons for it. And it's not that the inventions that he talks about are absolutely paramount to a resource-based economy either. It's really the train of thought. It's really understanding that if you focus on efficiency and you focus on all of these mediums of development that are happening in science and technology, and you push aside the monetary restrictions and push aside your old values, then you can see that the path is quite clear as far as what can be done. Jacques' notions of extrusion materials and all the great things that he's done, I think he's denoted fairly clearly. The specifics of which, no, he hasn't gone into a super amount of specifics, but what he has on his website alone is enough for me to know that there's a tremendous amount to build upon. And in time, I'm sure Jacques will continue to release things. It's a difficult question, but I don't. It's not. This whole thing isn't based on Jacques releasing some final construct or some final idea. I think everything he stated is enough to get people going to understand the direction and just the methodology and philosophy of the approach. Number 17. What are the key factors that hinder the human potential? That's a tremendously large question. I couldn't give you some long-winded, any answer would be extremely long-winded. What I would say off the cuff is that tradition and unbalanced ego identifications are some of the most colossal hindrances. And of course, negative reactions, anger reactions. Anger is a tremendous form of weakness. Those that just, sit around and just yell at others and have nothing better to do than to just criticize each other. Those are extremely weak-minded people, and those things are tremendous hindrances. It's an ego establishment to think that just because you belittle others somehow and bother other people, people draw satisfaction from that. It makes them feel good. And it's a real sick thing that we have to deal with. So there's lots of things like that. But really, it's the psychology that's the hindrance of our human potential. What's being reinforced by society? Let's see what time I have here. Let's see, 3:44. Okay, hi Peter. I've mentioned the idea of a resource-based economy to a few friends of mine, and for the most part they agree with it. However, they believe that psychedelic drugs is currently the only and most powerful way to expand society's consciousness in order for society to see us as one and cause a peaceful movement into the system that aligns with nature. I personally find this absurd. I'm sure you would agree. I'm trying to find a way to explain to them that through education and conditioning and the scientific method applied to our social values and decisions, we can transition to a better system. I'm going to go ahead and stop you there. There's a subculture that's been around for a long time of people that experiment with psychedelic drugs to think that's somehow the end-all. In the end, I have a documentary on the early use of psychedelic drugs that was done in Canada before it was illegal, and they used to use it for therapeutic reasons. And what they found is that psychedelic drugs tends to break up a person's associations. It breaks up long-held traditional beliefs, typically, things that they typically wouldn't question. It puts them into an unstable state. And now that could be supposed to be extremely destructive and extremely progressive. That's basically all I could say. It really comes down to information, though. You can't just sit in a room and do drugs and think it's going to do anything to better anything. That's nonsensical. If you just gave everybody in the world drugs, it's going to do anything? No. People need to be thinking and coming up with solutions. Those that have rigid value systems, they need to have new information presented to them, and they need to be put in a position that they can absorb that information. I think drug usage is overall a highly detrimental thing in the long run. In the later part of your question, you mentioned people like Timothy Leary. I think Timothy Leary was a bit out, to say the least, in regards to his ideas of society. There are some good statements that he had made and things that people had sent me, but to think that, quote, LSD is sort of the savior, and if you just take it, you're going to be doing good, that's a very, very dangerous thing to communicate to people. What I also found in this documentary is that people that take these types of drugs tends to trigger genetic propensities very, very acutely. So if you have someone that's from a family of schizophrenics, if they take these types of drugs, they have a high propensity to trigger that schizophrenic genetic propensity. So that's very dangerous for people, I think, if they don't know their family background. It's very powerful what these things can do, from what I've seen in the research. Number 19. Peter, Jacques says that the Venus Project Society is a translation. Peter, Jacques says that the Venus Project Society is a translation of all the world's religions into a way of life, rather than just lip service. You say applied spirituality. I live in the Bible Belt. Do you have any ideas how I can use this concept of heaven on earth, or better yet, the Lord will be done on earth to educate? Also, could part one of the first film actually block reception? Could the teachings of Jacques actually work in favor? Could the teachings of Jesus Christ actually work in our favor? By the way, I'm an infidel. Okay. There's a few points you raised here. Yes, I think though religion has two sides. Religion has the side of superstition, and religion has the side of spiritual, sort of a communal reciprocation. I don't know of any religion that just outright, at least fundamentally, outright denies human reciprocation. That is really what we talk about at the end of, say, the orientation video, and if you read the PDF, we talk about mutual reciprocation, the golden rules of all religions. That side, I think, is very much in line. I mean, this is everything religions have ever talked about as far as having peace and love for each other. This is an environment that would have a high propensity to support such values. Regarding part one of Zeitgeist 1, yeah, people tend to object to that. And that film was created before I even began work with the movement. I also think that sometimes you have to get under people's skin to get them to change. I've had emails of people that are irate about that section. I've had many emails from people that were completely changed. And by the end of the film, they had renounced their religion entirely. So it goes both ways. I'm not sure which is the more, is it the intellectual approach or is it the emotional approach that really changes people? As I've said before, I think the latter holds true in many ways. And then after they're shaken up a little bit, then you come back with information that is more academic, and hopefully they're more receptive to it. Humans do not really reason initially. They are emotional, reactionary. I think Jacques had I'm not going to even go into all of that. There was a great topic that Jacques talks about, how humans don't have the ability to think or reason. And his point is that we are locked into traditional frames of mind and set ideologies. It's very difficult for us to break those emotional identifications without something to shake it up. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think, I'm going to leave it at that. Really, the Venus Project and resource-based economy is everything that religions have always talked about. It's just applied. And unfortunately, for most religiously minded people, that's simply too foreign for them to even understand, especially those that are superstitious-oriented and not, quote, spiritually-oriented. I draw a distinction between the two, of course. Number 20. Hello, Peter. In Zeitgeist Addendum, you state that we should boycott Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, and Bank of America. You say this action will express contempt for the true powers behind the private banking cartel known as the Federal Reserve. If many people begin to bank with smaller branches, eventually the banks grow and become successful. The Federal Reserve has almost all the power and money, which ultimately puts them in control. My questions are, even if the private banking cartels do lose some business, and have to make changes, does it really cause enough of a dent in their pockets to make a difference? That's an interesting point. I would say that the reason I put that in the end of Zeitgeist isn't to assume that somehow we'd magically take down the entire banking structure. That was not the point. It was a gesture. I believe I used the word gesture in that description, actually. I might even use the word poetic. It's to basically, the goal, honestly, was to get press, was to get people to do this, which many people did, by the way. I got tons of emails of people that had just closed out their Bank of America accounts, and to see if it could shake the system up where some news agency would say something about it, because it's such a radical thing to denote. And it shows a position of contempt. Will that contempt take down the whole system? Of course not. People have to use banks in this structure. That's just the way it is. And I think moving to a smaller bank is poetic in the relative sense of what I'm describing. Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, and Bank of America are a massive cartel, are massive banks within a cartel, and they're just absorbing banks left and right at this stage as well. So it's just these power monopolies. You have to do something about them in the interim because they just become out of control. They're monsters. That's pretty much what the point was when I stated that. Number 21. How much time do I have here? Number 21, the U.S. will most likely have to implement widespread social programs in order to try and revive its economy, rather than strive to stimulate the economy merely to facilitate the continuation of the monetary system. Would it make sense to introduce limited aspects of a resource-based economy? For example, social programs that would provide clean air, food and water, housing, education, healthcare to all of its citizens, while concentrating efforts to develop automated systems in these areas. The economy and the Zeitgeist Movement would would mutually benefit. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I think what you're denoting, of course, would be a wonderful angle in the transition. It would be a tremendous angle. The problem is you have to realize that the market system isn't based on this type of efficiency. So if the U.S. government, say, nationalized the electricity industry, the energy industry, and said, okay, we're going to give everybody free energy through automated systems. So you realize they have to clean out and they have to remove the thousands and thousands of people that work for these industries. It would be heavily attacked, of course, and when you realize that the Congress is in the back pocket of the major cartel establishments that control things in business, you see that as extremely improbable. But I completely agree with you. I wish there was a hybrid blending of the monetary and non-monetary systems as a transitional phase. And I think in time certain social attributes will be forced. I think in time they will be upping, unemployment will be extended more and more and more and more to stop upheaval. Welfare will be increased. There'll be more and more people that are applying. These things will be natural gravitations, biosocial pressures, where the state is forced to, in order to maintain social stability, to start going in a more social direction. As I've stated many times, society is basically a capitalist system is basically always going to break down and rely on socialism to repair itself. And I just realized that I've been babbling on, and I have to get to my friend Jen, who's been waiting patiently, of the state chapters. So let's bring her on right now. Jen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I want to apologize. I've been rambling, and I have my times backwards. But we'll push a little bit more forward, and we'll eat a little bit to Gilbert's time. Sorry, Gilbert. We'll just see how it goes as far as the information we want to cover. But I'll, of course, have you back on in the future. Struggling with my cold, so my brain isn't functioning very well. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Thank you so much for coming on. I think it would be enlightening for everyone that's involved in the state chapters domestically in the United States to hear from you. Go ahead and run down a little bit about yourself and your background and how you kind of discovered the movement and anything you'd like to say in this regard.
Okay. Well, my name is Jen Wilding, and I do not use psychedelic drugs. I've been enjoying your radio program, listening. I think there have been some pretty good, interesting questions. Yeah. But I'm based in Chicago, but I'm not originally from Illinois. I'm actually originally from Kentucky, and I have also lived for a while in Indiana, because that's where I went to college. And you were asked, you wanted to know how I came to the movement, I guess.
Sure.
Well, I've been exploring a lot of things since college. Basically, one of the things that really attracts me to the movement is that it kind of came about at a time when I was very much interested in developing interests specifically in human development and psychology and sociology. And my background is actually in theater. And I studied acting in college and method acting, and was kind of going that route and pursuing acting, but in the process was discovering a lot about myself and realizing that when you create a character, you actually have to consider, you research what that person's environment is when you're constructing that identity before you take it on. And it started cueing things for me personally that allowed me to realize, wow, how much do I do for the person that I am? How applicable is this to me? And how much of who I am day to day, identity, is really just influenced by my environment and what I've been taught in all of the same ways that I construct a character for the stage or film. So I have been very interested in those kind of topics, which makes me incredibly excited about your new film coming up, because I think it's going to explore more of human development.
Yes, in part. Absolutely.
Am I right?
Yes.
So from that standpoint, I was kind of taking a look at my life, and I actually came out of Christian roots. I was pretty saturated in that. At one point in time, my father was a pastor of a Christian church. I went to college at a Christian college, and even so much so into that even in the process of that and those studies, I had a lot of questions that didn't quite, it kind of put me in a position where it was awkward conversing with some of my roommates and friends, because I had a lot of questions about our faith and was exploring those issues as well. And to the extent that while I was in college, also studied Koine Greek for translation of the New Testament, because I wanted to get to the bottom of it, really, and see what is this about, how much of what I learned is really from the text, what is this text. I wanted to basically get to the roots of the faith, and even beyond that, exploring the Judeo-Christian roots. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but so I've been coming out of that for several years now, probably the last 10 years, realizing that there, especially working with translations, that there's a very human element to them. I also have an interest in creative writing, and I was very interested I suddenly became interested in religion and religious literature as literature, and works that are representing a culture and a space in time where these are ideas, these were stories that were very meaningful for people, and so I started taking a different view. So when I saw Zeitgeist 1, I thought, this is great, this is amazing, people need to know this. And also I was really excited about Addendum, because I was questioning all of the things around me about, as far as where our government was going. Are we in a system that could possibly work? Would there ever be a true free market? I was very much a libertarian sympathizer at that time, and I started to learn that there really is no such thing as a free market. It's just so manipulated. In any respect, there's just too much in the reward on the values that really don't support humanity. So I was very excited to see a movement come out of that, and I definitely wanted to be a part of it. In Chicago, I started a city Ning social group to connect with other people involved in the movement. I ended up sort of at the last minute pulling together a Z-Day event for the Chicago area, and then eventually that kind of evolved into, I got an email from you saying, hey, would you mind heading up the state chapter? So I thought, hey, why not? somebody's got to do it, and
right.
I didn't know anybody else who was stepping up for that. And I definitely, if it was going to be down to me doing it or nobody doing it, I wanted to step up and take that on, so I did. And from there, have been working to build that up. And right now we're having regular meetings for Illinois online. And hopefully we'll eventually have some subchapters going on with the different areas of the state. But more recently, as you mentioned, I was designated as the national coordinator of the U.S. state chapters, just to help people get chapters developed in all of the states. And I thought that what an amazing opportunity, because I really want to see this go. And I've been involved in volunteering efforts before, and I know that I could sit in my chair and say, you know what, I have those thoughts. This needs to happen. Somebody needs to be doing this. And yet, if nobody else is doing it, but I'm sitting here thinking it, it's like you either, I don't know, need to present a solution, or I need to stop thinking that. So
Sure.
I thought, I need to step up. So,
which is extremely admirable, and definitely we're very thankful of that. The state chapters, I think we have about 39 so far. Is that correct?
Yes, by my current records, 39 out of 50 states
That's great.
are either active or in development. And I think that's really exciting and inspiring to grow so much so fast in just only a year.
That's less than a year, absolutely. It's been fantastic. I'm hoping people listening that are involved in their regions and various states that maybe aren't represented will come forward and send you an email and try to get the rest of those states taken care of. My goal for everyone listening is to have all 50 states taken care of before Zeitgeist Day of 2010, and to even have maybe a section of the symposium dedicated to the state chapters and other ideas like that. So anyone listening, please come forward and have some courage. The real issue isn't that you have to do a bunch of stuff right away. It's the first stage is maintaining the website and dealing with emails and educating yourself on the direction. And then as more people come forward, you develop a team, and then you start to have events. And that's really what it comes down to. Now, Jen, I understand you have a chapters meeting which occurs every 2 weeks. Is that correct? Go ahead and describe the meeting that you do periodically.
Well, we just started them last month. So and then we did 2 last month, and we have 1 coming up this month. But I'm going to kind of feel it out, because we did that because of the holidays coming up in the U.S. But there are still the international meetings that Gilbert does that are separate. But the U.S. meetings, we have 1 coming up on Monday, December 14th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And those happen online in Ventrilo. And they're open to anyone. Anybody can sit in. They're open to the public, although it may be really boring to you because it's kind of administrative stuff. But certainly if you have an interest, just, for kicks, just to see what's going on in the different chapters, feel free to sit in and listen. And if you have some ideas to contribute, that's what it's all about. It's basically to coordinate, to help people in the development of chapters and strengthen us all the way around. So we do have that coming up. If you want to keep an eye out for other meetings and when they happen, if you can't make this one, we do record them, and the links for the recorded meetings are usually accessible. I try to get them up the next day, but you can check in the forum, the main forum, the zeitgeistmovement.com website, forum under the chapters category to find where you can access information about the meetings or even hear recordings of past meetings to see what's already been discussed. Especially if you're a newer chapter coming up, you may want to get caught up, or if you're thinking about doing a chapter, that would be a good way to kind of get your feet wet or listen in and see if it's something you do want to take on and what other people are doing. I will say that some of our newest state chapters include Vermont and Tennessee, which is not yet on the gateway, but I did see that they got their website up.
Okay.
We also
I'll take care of that.
Indiana is currently a Facebook group, but we are working to get a website for them They were trying to decide between doing a third party and using the template, so we're still in communication about that.
Very good.
Wisconsin is coming up in development, as well as I've heard from Arkansas, North Carolina, Iowa, Maine, and Virginia. That are, those are Maine and Virginia are some of the more recent ones. So if you have been wondering if your state even has a chapter, it may be in development. If you don't think your state has a chapter or you're not sure and you want to head one up, please send me an email to jen.il@thezeitgeistmovement.com. And I thought maybe I should request, since some people are in the chat, I'm not watching it because it's distracting, but
sure.
If you, I'm sure you have the same problem, like I couldn't, if I were you, it would just completely throw me off. But
no,
if you are a U.S. chapter coordinator or a member of a U.S. state chapter and you're listening to the live broadcast, please use the chat and throw up your state chapter website so that new Zeitgeist Movement supporters can find you. So I thought that might be something to get people connected.
Absolutely. It's very important. I want to say again, I think I said it earlier in the broadcast, that anyone out there that is in a region that is represented by a chapter and they're just, listening casually, please connect with your local chapter. This thing really can't work unless people develop communities across the world in a very real, tangible way, So I want to make sure everyone really understands that the next level of this is the chapter integration and participation. And then, as I think I've stressed before, we have countries, and then we have the states and territories. As far as the United States is concerned, we have the country, we have the states, and then we have city chapters that emerge, which fall under the jurisdiction essentially of the states. And there was another issue that we can talk about briefly, and it's been brought up a few times to me, and that is a university circuit. And that is something that I will be in discussion with you about. And if anybody out there is in the university and would like to start, I'm not sure what the technical term would be, but a group in your university to represent the Zeitgeist Movement for just the university, the first thing you would do is to find a state chapter which you would be an umbrella for, which would be the umbrella for your university. And I think, what do you think about that idea, Jen, as a university circuit, to get the lecture team going and just to create, obviously we need educators, we need students to really think about this more than probably any other group, if you will. But I think the university circuit would be a good idea, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm willing to help with that any way I can.
Fantastic.
And you did mention, too, and I think this is a good goal, you were hoping to see all 50 states represented with chapters by Z-Day of 2010.
Yeah,
so
hopefully.
I think that we're trending to that. So that's exciting. But I will say, for those of you who will be emailing me, please, I'm going to thank you in advance for your patience because I'm taking on this coordination as a part-time voluntary job, and so it may take me a few days to respond depending on the email volume, but I am going through them and trying to get things sorted out. Sometimes we get multiple requests, and I need to sort out what has been done on them before, but I think we're getting there.
Well, fantastic. We really appreciate it. Believe me, I understand how it goes as far as being bombarded with emails. And in time, maybe we can expand what you're doing to a couple other people that you trust, and we can relieve the pressure. Because for me, it's just been crazy trying to do so much, and it's like it's a godsend that you and other people have come forward that I have a great deal of faith in. So I want to thank you very much. I'm going to have to move on to Gilbert now, unfortunately, but Jen, I will have you back on very soon.
Fortunately, you're moving on to Gilbert. It's not unfortunate at all. I'm sure to have plenty of good things to say about international chapters.
Oh, absolutely. I guess what
Thanks,
I meant
Peter.
is I sideswiped you because I babbled on too much of my questions is my point.
No, it's fine.
But I do want to have you back on as things develop, and it's very, very important. So everybody, please get in touch with Jen if you have a question regarding state chapters, and if we can get all 50 states up by Zeitgeist Day 2010, that would be wonderful. So thanks so much, Jen.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Gilbert. He is calling in right now. And there he is.
Peter.
Hey, Gilbert.
How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. How about me?
Yep, you sound good. I apologize
All right.
if I'm a little clouded. My brain isn't operating very well.
It's all right. You explained it, so that's all good. I'm happy to be on here again.
Absolutely. No, it's great to have you back. And I know you've been doing a tremendous amount of stuff regarding just general updates of the movement, regarding work with Zeitgeist Day. And of course, if anyone doesn't know, Gilbert heads the international meetings. Jen, whom we just had on, heads our state chapter meetings. Gilbert heads the international meetings. In time, we'll probably be expanding even more so. But if you're listening, you're not aware of the reality that we do have biweekly international meetings through Ventrilo. Gilbert, go ahead and discuss the information regarding that for anybody that's not familiar.
That's fine. Actually, now that you mention it, I do have a couple of announcements in that regard, other than the other announcement that I had.
Okay.
Basically, one major development that we'll be having is that we'll be starting with European meetings as of January, as I've had a lot of chapters in the European area have been added, and basically, when we do the international meeting, it's sometimes too late for them to participate. So I've been thinking about when the time would be right to start them, to start a European meeting, and I think that January will be a great time to start that. I'll be hosting those as well, unless I'll be able to delegate it to somebody else. But I'll be happy to start it up.
Great.
And in the same line of thinking, the Australian meeting. Australia is a very huge continent as well, have already been started up, and we have designated another coordinator for the Australian chapters. His name is David Solsky. Basically has been heading the Australian chapters, or at least trying to coordinate them for quite a while, and I thought it was time to get another member of our active community to help us out with the chapters. So welcome, David.
Yes, welcome.
And definitely. So the last period, a lot of new chapters have been launched. I won't go through all the trouble to name them individually, but I can say that we're rapidly expanding at a rate of about 8 chapters per month, and as you said, the state chapters are going quite well, the USA state ones, and they are coming in at the rate that will likely reach the goal that you just named before C-Day 2010. As for the other continents, I was quite happy one of these days because we are getting some feedback back from Asia and from Africa, regions I didn't expect to really contact us that much yet while we weren't actively promoting the movement. And I do have to note that I really see the movement as not being even operational yet, and I'm sure you feel the same way, as we are actually doing a lot, but we're really just in the organizational part, so I was really happy to hear this.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. This is what I would say is phase 1. In fact, I should probably detail my perception of the progress of the movement in regard to the different levels of participation and actions, and that's a very good point. Once we have enough chapters represented, then we'll move into kind of a different operational capacity where we begin to operate as a unit with specific events much more frequently, not just Zeitgeist Day, but maybe even periodic things at set points per month and things like that. And that's definitely in the works for consideration. But this is definitely phase 1, so good point.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it as well. Well, basically we had a lot of other things to talk about. I realize we won't go through everything since we're on a little lesser time schedule than we had planned. But one of the major things I wanted to talk about is Z-Day. As you mentioned, I've been spending a lot of time preparing it, and the main idea behind it was because last Z-Day was obviously also a huge success. But in the meanwhile, we got the local chapters running. The support for the movement has grown worldwide, and I think that an open Z-Day format will be too hectic to deal with this year. So I thought it might be a good idea to have a coordinating team, and in that regard, I set one up. Actually, after this show, an hour and a half after, we'll have a meeting with the Z-Day team on the Ventrilo to talk further about how we can best organize this. So in the same regards, you only had a small moment to glance at the Z-Day plan, but that one is in the works as well.
Yep.
Basically, I'm writing together with the Z-Day team a strategic plan to have anybody that's interested in holding a Z-Day event have a quick and concise guide, which will be translated in all major languages to have some instructions and ideas to set up a Z-Day event. So I think that will be good. It's titled a little corny, a 5-step plan to Z-Day 2010, but hey, whatever. If it works, it works, right?
Absolutely. And I'm going to begin actually this week to update the website in regards to preparation for Zeitgeist Day, holistically getting the sites available and getting programming set up so we can begin to get feedback, but also to start literally setting up events globally. So that is a very, very important issue. I think this year will be very impactful considering the number of chapters, considering the intent, and the immense amount of media that's been coming forward, the popularity of the Venus Project. So I'm really hoping that after this particular event day, a large number of people in the world will be informed about what we're doing. So I'm very, very excited, and thank you. I think that what you had given is great, and I will help edit the Z-Day plan, and we'll get that online relatively soon when I get the page set up. And I'm also going to have packages, as I mentioned to you before, which will be full, free, downloadable packages of an array of media that can be utilized, along with tips of how to go about organizing specific attributes. So all of you out there that are involved in chapters, it's very important you start to think about Zeitgeist Day and what your intents are. And I'm sorry, Gilbert, did you say the meeting for the Z-Day team is happening today?
Yes, it is. It's actually a small meeting, but I'm sure that a lot of people will pop in anyway.
Sure.
But
what time were you doing that?
It's 1.5 hours after the radio show, so usually when the international meeting is being held, that's the same time.
So 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time is basically what you're saying. Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Very good. So if anyone out there has some ideas they want to brainstorm, this isn't a private meeting. Did you want to have this as a private meeting, or are you going to have a public meeting?
No, it's not private at all. I mean,
good. Very good.
Yeah,
I figured as much.
So.
Fantastic. I'll definitely pop in there for that. And anyone listening, please feel free to stretch ideas. I've gotten a great amount of feedback in regards to things to do, but there's always many angles that I never think of, and obviously we all know that more minds are better than one, and I hope we can all behave as such. So, very good.
Yeah, definitely. In that regard, I mean, I'll go a little off topic here, but since I'm on here and since I'm working with a lot of people that are really active, and I just wanted to have a little quick moment and say, and maybe this sounds corny as well, but I just want to say thank you, everybody. You've all been doing great, not only the chapters, but everybody that's contributing to the movement. I know that sometimes working on it day by day can be a little stressful and all, but everybody's doing a very good job. And since I work a lot with the chapters, I want to let you know that I enjoy coming to all your meetings and to hear you and to notice how much effort you are putting into this. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you because I feel I don't do that enough.
Yes, I would couple in my thanks as well. I know that we live in a world that time is money, and as I've denoted earlier in the broadcast, sadly, and basically people would tend to lose motivation that aren't, true believers, if you will. And I know how difficult it can be for many of us out there that have day jobs and have things they have to do and various liabilities. The real goal, I think, Gilbert, for everyone that's doing stuff, to say it publicly, is that you have to try to find a way to make it comfortable for yourself and not try to be too extreme. I have a tendency of extremity, and I think a lot of people out there do. You get excited and you want to jump into things, for 12 hours and you get exhausted. I'm very guilty of that myself. And the recommendation I have for everyone that's working in these chapters is to try and be a little laid back about it. And if you're overwhelmed, do your best to delegate. And this is the lesson that I've been learning, because I think, as I mentioned before, the first 6 months of the movement was basically just me and one other person doing everything. And it's been a very big trial. very, grating emotionally and intellectually and physically. So we have to keep that in mind, all of us that maintain this dedication to just, relax a little bit. And if you get a problem, there is a solution to the problem with trying to find others that can pair in and help. So I want to just reiterate that because, I'm sure you get emails just as I do, Gilbert, of people that are very gung-ho and that they're willing to do just about anything, And sometimes those that have the extremity of approach can self-destruct much more quickly. Have you noticed that tendency? I have.
I do. I certainly have. I mean, obviously, and Jen can tell you about this as well. Lately, we've been having some chapter emails of really explosive people that are, they give out a tendency that they're a little fragile, and then we're a little nervous about how we should go about it. I get them as well in my international mails, and then that obviously leaves a little doubt in as to whether we can designate this person to head a chapter. But yeah, I definitely know what you mean. People who are really frustrated or can't really handle the things might be self-destructive or might be a risk with their self-interest. Sorry.
Right. Or impatience. Impatience is a big one. I've had a few people that I tried to get to do things, and their impatience was so great that they literally just couldn't even handle just waiting a little bit of time for something. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out there. We all need patience, and I think it's wonderful what's going on your end. It's a perfect example of this level of patience and dealing with the problems that do arise in this environment. So I think you and Jen are doing a great job, and I think in time we'll bring in other people. You've already mentioned some others that are slowly coming forward. And back to the technical point of chapters in general, I think eventually we'll break this up by continent, and we'll basically have continent heads. And then as things get even bigger and bigger, then we'll break down by country heads, assuming that we have, thousands and thousands of people per country as things move forward. I think that would be the general nature of the gravitation for organization. So anyway.
Yeah, definitely. We've spoken about this before quite a bit, but a bunch of times, but obviously we need to talk about it a little more in the future. But that's basically the most logical thing to do. Like I said to you before in private conversations, well, we can't stress it the way it goes. We're not going to actively pursue people to head up a chapter. It's a natural flow. When people get interested in this, then they will be drawn to the movement, and then they will be finding a need to participate or want to participate, and at that point perhaps a chapter will be formed. And this will also go like that on the level of structure you just talked about. When the need arises, a coordinator or somebody, a point person, so to say, will obviously have to come up and will be designated, and it's needed. A lot of people that I talk to about this are really of the opinion that we should automate the whole chapter process, and that a system that should be created, some sort of AI. And I can understand that the systems approach and that sometimes automation in terms of these processes could be good in the future, but I think that at least in this stage, that the humane aspect in this organization is very important.
Sure. No, I agree. Well, unfortunately, at this day and age, we have a lot of people that are very much against what we're doing without any understanding. So to have a system that, well, first of all, the type of system required that you just denoted isn't really in existence right now. We could automate a lot of things after people are brought in that we trust to head these chapters, but even an arbitrary system for development and creation of a website, it will be abused at this level, and we know that. So
I think so too.
Yeah, we all know there's a lot of people out there that are just basically have nothing better to do than to bother us in negative ways without asking any real questions about what we're doing. They just have a negative propensity. And it's something that we have to deal with. It's an unfortunate reality of the transition, which I will talk about a lot in the new film in general, but it also pertains to the way we operate things. People complain to us a lot about how the forum operates and how we construct things, and the fact that we do have to get rid of certain people that are there simply to cause trouble, and then suddenly it's becoming censorship, and we have these ongoing debates, and no one seems to really put into focus the tremendous amount of social distortion that we have in the world right now, with people that really don't even understand what progress could be, and therefore they just take their time to bother anything that might orient change, and people are terrified of change.
I agree fully, and that's, I mean, obviously, you know that lately we've had some trouble on the forum, and I mean, it's not fun to talk about it, but it's the reality, and I mean, the forum is, like you said before, it's not the movement, the other official mediums are not the movement, they're just places we are trying to work and get something together. Obviously, the forum has some discussion parts, and I mean, discussion should flow freely there. But there's also a need to keep it a clean working area for everybody that really wants to do something with this movement. If we're at this point are going to be too tolerant to people that are actually coming there to troll or to actually try and disrupt things, then it will be impossible for us to keep moving at the same pace that we're moving now. So in that regard, that's what I wanted to say basically about it.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And that's just the reality of the scenario at this point in time. And by the way, anyone out there that's listening that is a detractor that is against what we're doing, you know, I get a lot of emails that are just impulsive in nature. The real issue is asking questions. You know what I mean? People don't ask questions. You have to ask questions if you expect to resolve anything. And those that tend to be opposed to what we're doing, they don't ask questions. They just project their associations. And I think that's a very important point to state to anybody that has objections to anything that we talk about, is to ask questions. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So Gilbert, we have 5 minutes left. What would you like to cover in the last 5 minutes? Anything specific?
Yeah, well, we did prepare for a little more time to be available, but
don't worry, I'll have you on briefly next time as well. In fact, I'll probably do a longer show next time. I'll do a 2-hour show next time with the Venus Project and questions, and have you on. So, but go ahead.
Well, don't stress it, but anyway, the last thing I wanted you to note is that, well, since we can't really discuss about it, I'll just throw it in an open way. Peter and I have been discussing about a chapter wiki. There's been a lot of brainstorming going on in this sense, but basically the way I see it, and Peter, maybe you can confirm after I state how I would see it, is that it would be very much interlinked with the site, and it would be basically a portal with info for all the chapters that could be updated through various feeds and would actually become a lively place for chapters to get actual information or information that's up to date and where they can contribute as well into keeping this wiki page up to date and become a major resource of information for all the chapters.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That is a tremendously good idea. We need a place, a hub for various information, and the wiki, I think, is a prime spot to do that. So I think we're going to develop a wiki section entirely dedicated based on, we'll just keep dividing this with the wiki as necessitated, but we'll start with an international section and a domestic state section for the U.S. And we'll get a set of information. We'll get all the documents that you've created up there, and we can also help with more specifics regarding Z-Day that are chapter related. So absolutely, I think I'm going to try and get that going this week, and we can stay in touch about that. So that's a fantastic idea. Yes.
And that would be a very good idea. Well, basically, also what you've been talking about were the university circuits, like Jen already said. I mean, sorry, on a domestic level, she will obviously be able to help you much more. I'm not in the States. And, I mean, this is something that the local chapters can get involved in as well. I mean, obviously, I do feel that there is a difference between letting just everybody lecture and having people that are adequate to do it lecture. This is very personal opinion, and I'm quite subjective because you lecture and I have lectured before as well, and probably you will see a European or Dutch lecture in English. That doesn't make sense, but I will do one in the Netherlands in English, and I'll post it online soon. But there's, I think, when you are relaying this message to a certain crowd, then it needs to be refined, and you would need to be able to do it. Obviously, spreading the word is a good thing at all, so I'm not really trying to criticize anyone, but it's a touchy subject as far as adequate lecturers go, and I think we need to be a little selective in that.
Sure. No, absolutely. The lecture circuit concept has been on the back burner for a while just because of that reason. But we have 20 seconds left. So, Gilbert, I'm going to have you back on next time for like 10, 15 minutes, and we'll go from there. So 10 seconds left. I really appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you too, Peter.
All right, talk soon.
Bye.
Bye. And we're not streaming anymore, everybody, so this is going to be in the back end of the site when you can get the MP3. But I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll talk to you all very soon.